December 20th, 1943, the B-17 Flying Fortress. Lucky Strike limped across the English Channel, its number 3 engine sheared off by flak over Bremen, hydraulic fluid streaking the fuselage like blood, and its ball turret dangling at a broken angle. By every rule of aeronautics, it should have fallen into the North Sea 20 minutes earlier. But Lieutenant Marcus Webb somehow kept it in the air, guided by sheer will and perhaps something else, something done to the plane weeks earlier by a mechanic who didn't believe in manuals. When Lucky Strike slammed onto the runway at RAF Bassingbourn on one landing gear and skidded to a halt in a shower of sparks, the crash crews braced for corpses. Instead, 8 shaken men climbed out alive. The 9th, the ball turret gunner, was gone. But the rest survived a flight no B-17 should have endured. Colonel James Albertson stared at the wreckage and asked one question. How? The answer was in Hangar 3, where Staff Sergeant Paul Zuk, a grease-stained mechanic from Pittsburgh, was elbow-deep in another bomber's engine cowling, performing adjustments that weren't in any manual and could have earned him a court-martial. The Army Air Forces were losing bombers at a rate they didn't understand. Planes falling not from catastrophic hits, but from single points of failure. A flak fragment through a hydraulic line, a single ruptured fuel pipe, one electrical short. Boeing's design was efficient, not resilient. Zuk, who had grown up fixing coal trucks during the Great Depression, recognized the problem immediately. Too many systems relied on one line, one route, one fragile point. He believed in redundancy, in backups, in making it work when it shouldn't. By fall of 1943, mechanics noticed that bombers Zuk had serviced, planes that took damage that should have been fatal, were returning home. Hydraulic failures that didn't end in crashes, electrical hits that didn't knock out systems. When asked what he'd done, Zuk just said, "I fixed what was killing them." He scavenged tubing and valves from wrecked planes, rerouting hydraulics through improvised backup lines, installing manual isolation valves so pilots could redirect pressure mid-flight. He rerouted fuel lines and added crossover valves so one tank's failure wouldn't starve all engines. He even ran secret backup electrical lines from the auxiliary generator to critical instruments. None of it was legal. All of it worked. By early 1944, 17 bombers carried Zuk's forbidden fixes. When engineering officer Captain Ronald Fletcher discovered the modifications, he was horrified, until Zuk showed him the numbers. 3 planes hit, 3 returned home. Colonel Albertson ordered an inspection, and soon the Air Force was caught between punishing a mechanic for violating every rule and rewarding him for saving lives. A formal investigation began under Major Henry Watkins. Engineers from Boeing arrived to inspect the unauthorized modifications, dismissing them as dangerous until test missions proved otherwise. Out of 11 combat flights, 5 bombers with Zuk's systems returned from missions where others didn't. One aircraft, Memphis Belle II, lost all primary hydraulics over Germany, yet completed its mission and landed safely thanks to Zuk's manual bypass valves. Boeing's lead engineer could only admit, "This shouldn't work, but it does." By March 1944, Zuk's modifications were producing irrefutable results. His design philosophy was brutally practical. Your system works great until it doesn't. Mine works badly all the time, but it keeps working. The Army issued an official technical order, approving field installation of hydraulic bypass systems, legalizing what Zuk had already done. But bureaucrats left out his fuel and electrical fixes, labeling them unnecessary. Zuk ignored them and kept installing them anyway. Word spread across East Anglia. Mechanics from other bomb groups visited him, took notes, and carried his methods home. Within weeks, dozens of B-17s were flying with Zuk systems, some officially modified, most not. By spring 1944, the survival rate of Zuk-modified bombers was statistically undeniable. Groups with his full package of modifications suffered fewer losses and mechanical aborts than any others in the 8th Air Force. Pilots noticed it too. The planes just came back. When official authorization finally arrived in April, most of the work had already been done by mechanics working after hours, trading diagrams and handwritten notes instead of waiting for orders. Colonel Albertson presented the survival data to Air Force analysts, who confirmed what everyone on the ground already knew. Zuk's illegal systems worked, and they were saving lives. By the war's end, Zuk's ideas, redundant hydraulics, cross-fed fuel lines, and secondary electrical systems, were incorporated into later B-17G and post-war bomber designs. Unofficial reports estimated that his modifications helped return over 340 aircraft that would otherwise have been lost, saving between 3,000 and 4,000 airmen from death or capture. Yet when Zuk left the service in 1945, his record listed only exceptional proficiency in aircraft maintenance. He returned to Pittsburgh, reopened his garage, and never spoke much about the war. Decades later, in 1973, a researcher named Dr. Michael Torres found him and asked why he'd risked court-martial to make unauthorized changes. Zuk's answer was simple. Guys were dying because the planes weren't built right. I could fix that, or I could follow the manual. Easy choice. Lucky Strike, the first plane to bear his work, was scrapped in 1954, but photographs of its modified systems were quietly included in maintenance manuals for generations of Air Force mechanics, credited only as field-developed redundancy systems. When Paul Zuk died in 1989, his obituary mentioned nothing about the B-17. His grease-stained notebooks, filled with sketches, pressure diagrams, and the shorthand of a man who built safety out of ingenuity, now sit in the archives of the Air Force Museum. His name was never written in the manuals, but his work changed them forever. The B-17 Flying Fortress became the legend it's remembered as, not just because of the men who flew it, but because of one mechanic who refused to let rules kill airmen and proved that sometimes the people closest to the problem are the ones who find the real solutions.